Hey, Pretty Girl Club. Welcome to Decentering Men, Episode 4. And today I'm going to talk to you about more reasons why it is not a good investment for you to spend your entire life centering yourself around finding a relationship. I've noticed that a lot of women are expected to be a man's therapist. You're often expected to process that man's emotions for him. Women are often viewed as incomplete beings, or we are known as not being successful if we're not coupled up with a man. Yet a man can be praised whether he's a bachelor, or a married dad, or a divorcee, or a single dad. And notice how we don't keep that same energy for single moms. I've noticed that men are also praised for being fathers, and they're allowed to go bald, they're allowed to be ugly, yet women are not allowed to go bald or be ugly. You will get scrutinized and criticized for that. If you're not pretty, you are not fulfilling your duty as a woman. But if you're married to a man and living with him, you won't always be dressed up 24/7, so there will be moments when you look ugly. We all know that men do not put ugly women on a pedestal. This is why the more familiar a man gets with you and the more times he sees you looking quote unquote regular with no makeup or with a bonnet on, he is less likely to pedestalize you over time or to give you that same pretty privilege over time. Another pattern that I've noticed is that a lot of long-term relationships are mostly built on trauma bonding. Have you ever noticed how when two people adore each other, people call it puppy love? But when people have been through decades of suffering together, people call that real love and strong love. It's as if people equate having real love to how much struggle and hardships you can endure. How much suffering are you willing to go through to stay with a man? How many hardships can you endure? Ask a man why he loves you, and usually he will begin naming all of the different forms of suffering you endured in order to stay with him. He will say things like, I love her because she was there for me when I had nothing to give. She was still with me when I was on drugs. I love her because she stayed with me after I cheated all those times. All of those things are not love, but they are codependency. I've noticed that whenever I ask a person to define love, they tend to define codependency, meaning you're depending on each other for your own emotional strength, where one person is weak, the other person is strong, as if you can't be kind of strong on your own. You need that other person. So it's this codependent dynamic. I've also noticed that most women are socialized to become codependent. We are socialized to feel responsible for the happiness of our husbands and children. Most women haven't been socialized to say no or set boundaries. Women are socialized to be martyrs for the needs of their children and their husbands. Most women are also socialized to idealize relationships and the happily ever after mindset. And by the way, that doesn't exist. A lot of us, from the time that we were children, we were taught that the pinnacle of happiness was finding a Prince Charming. It was finding a man or whatever. And I've noticed that a lot of men are not socialized the same way. Men are socialized to sleep with as many beautiful women as possible. They are socialized to be as non-monogamous as possible. Men are encouraged to cheat while women are shamed for cheating. I've also noticed that most women are socialized to cling to romantic fantasies, while most men are socialized to cling to sexual fantasies. The problem with this is that most male sexual fantasies involve more than one woman. So why should you give your life, your womb, and a discount on bills to a man who you will never be able to sexually satisfy and who will never be able to be a true emotional support to you? A lot of men are not even socialized to be emotionally intelligent and sacrificial. Men are socialized to be independent builders and conquerors. Of course, some men fail at this, but once a man has conquered you and got you locked down by his side, he is no longer going to pursue you like he used to because he has already won you. He's already won his prize. He's already conquered you. He's going to start going out and conquering other things, right? Like bigger career goals, doing his passions and hobbies, and in some cases, other women. All while you give up your career goals and your passions to birth and raise his children and clean his home. One of the top complaints from married women who are unhappy in their marriages is lack of emotional intimacy with their husbands. This is because men are not socialized to process and express their emotions and have emotional intimacy. In fact, I dare you to ask a man to define the term emotional intimacy, and he probably won't even be able to explain what it is or even give examples of it. Emotional intimacy is a close emotional bond characterized by mutual understanding, trust, vulnerability, and communication. But most men don't show vulnerability because they're not socialized to do so. They are socialized to believe that if they show any emotional vulnerability whatsoever, that it can and will be used against them. And a lot of little boys are socialized this way. They're told things like suck it up or man up. And when little boys try to communicate their feelings and needs as children, most adults will tell those little boys to stop whining or to be a big boy. So this trains young men to grow up and to not communicate or show vulnerability. This also causes a lack of depth in his adult relationships with other men, which is why most men have surface level friendships. Men don't usually go to each other's houses and cry on each other's shoulders or talk about their deepest, darkest fears and insecurities with one another, but women do. Women are able to develop complex emotional connections with other women, and this is why women are often more well versed when it comes to emotional intelligence. Women are socialized to be nurturing, which means women are more likely to have other women around them who provide a nurturing and restorative presence in their lives. Men on average do not have nurturers around them. Men on average do not have emotionally available, emotionally caring, and nurturing male friends. Men usually have activity-centered or hobby-centered friendships, meaning that they meet up to do a particular thing, like play pool or watch football. Meanwhile, women on average will have one-on-one conversations with their closest friends that last for hours and go in depth about their past traumas. Women will vent to one another, and women often share embarrassing stories or other vulnerable and sensitive information with each other. Men don't usually share embarrassing and sensitive information with other men, and this in turn makes men very validation starved. And it causes the average man to actually feel more emotionally isolated than normal because that man, he has all of the emotional burdens for the past 35 years. All of those emotional burdens are just sitting there inside of him because he hasn't processed them. He hasn't been taught how to process those things. He most likely hasn't been to therapy. He gets told by the other men in his life to just kind of suck it up or man up or that it's not that big of a deal. But there are a lot of articles and studies that show that emotions without venting for a long time, that leads to mental exhaustion. So this is why a lot of men who are filled with unresolved traumas and unresolved emotions have a hard time opening up about their feelings for a woman. And this is why men also tend to shut down during conflict as opposed to talking it out. Most men are inexperienced in dealing with difficult and complex emotions, which is why men often end up having random yet extreme emotional outbursts of anger. A lot of men do not have healthy coping mechanisms because, like I said, they're not even socialized to have emotional intelligence in the same way that women are supposed to. A lot of men, they're not socialized to process their emotions, to work through emotional traumas. In fact, emotions just get swept under the rug. I've even heard some men say, I don't care about my emotions. I don't live based on my emotions. You know, a lot of men, they don't even have the emotional vocabulary or the emotional bandwidth to deal with things like rejection or to deal with things like sadness or loneliness or depression. And so this is why we see a lot of men who have these what seem to be random yet extreme outbursts of anger, ranting, screaming, and rage. Some men even resort to violence or substance abuse, and they have no idea that it is linked to their unresolved emotions. Most violent crimes are committed by men, and men are more likely than women to use illicit drugs, according to studies. This is all because, from the time they were little boys, they are socialized to ignore their own emotions and to not deal with them. This leads to mental illnesses later on. And if a man is not even aware of his own emotions, if he won't even deal with his own problems or go to therapy or anything like that, wouldn't that mean that by default, most men are walking around with undiagnosed mental illnesses, such as narcissistic personality disorder, bipolar disorder, compulsive sex addiction, which is a mental illness? People might be thinking having a lot of sex sounds fun. Not when you're a mentally ill sex addict. Symptoms of sex addiction include little to no satisfaction from performing sexual activities, conflict in your relationship due to over focusing on sex, as well as, in extreme cases, criminal sexual offenses, such as harassing women in bus stations, etc. Not to mention the overwhelming pornography addiction that most men struggle with. This causes men to have unrealistic expectations about sex. It causes men to become more irritable than normal when they don't get sex from you, and it also causes them to be less satisfied with sex in general. And these are just a few reasons to decenter men. I'm not telling you to become asexual or anything because I understand you may still want a relationship. That's fine. But it's important to approach men from a decentered state of mind because men sure as hell are approaching you from a decentered state of mind. And I'm not saying that all men are bad. If you want to find that needle in a haystack, you can. If you want to find the good one or the good unicorn or whatever, by all means, go for that. But I have noticed that a lot of men tend to view women as kind of like this final accessory to their success and not as an actual human being that they want to love and cherish. But this is why I created my Dark Femininity Masterclass because there's so much more to life than just men. And if you do want to date, it's important to do it with a balanced mindset. The ideal candidate for the Dark Femininity Masterclass is a woman who's serious about investing in herself and her future, and a woman who wants to social climb, meaning you want to have a social circle filled with leveled up people. This includes men who are actually emotionally available, men who understand their own emotions. No, that doesn't mean he's feminine. It doesn't mean he's gay. It just means that he is actually mature. So if you do want to date, I think you should only date men who are leveled up in that area. And also, when it comes to my masterclass, it is for the type of woman who wants to keep herself on the pedestal at all times. I've had quite a few of you guys show interest in the masterclass, and some of you guys have been saying how my content has helped you to feel seen and validated, and that you've never been able to have a safe space like this one. The type of person that would get the most from my Dark Femininity Masterclass is a woman who's a good listener, a woman who's able to reflect on herself and her own life so that she can make the changes needed to overcome trauma. Because a lot of us do have trauma when it comes to men. A lot of us do have PTSD when it comes to men and the way that they have interacted with us. But my course has over 40 different journal prompts in it that are designed for you to sit down and write down exactly what your traumas have been around men or around jealous people and how you can overcome them. And everything in my Dark Femininity course is specifically tailored to both the privileges and the traumas of MLS women. You will definitely be clearing some emotional blocks and emotional traumas throughout this course, and you're going to walk out of it feeling more confident with a clear strategy on how to social climb and how to decenter men, whether you want to continue dating or not. And then that's going to help you so that you don't have to be stuck in these monocultural spaces. You don't have to be stuck with these men who are not emotionally leveled up. They're not emotionally available. Anyway, how have you been decentering men? What pushed you over the edge and made you decide that the investment wasn't worth it? Let me know in the comments section, and I'll talk to you next time. Stay pretty, ladies.